Well, welcome back everybody. So we're going to do a very simple rear brake job on this Toyota. Pads and rotors on the rear. Nothing fancy, pretty simple. I leave the car in neutral like usual so that I'll be able to set the lift, but first let me go and close this garage door. I'm letting all the heat out of here and it's freezing. Alright, get my gloves on. Yeah, Toyota's very easy to work on in my opinion. Most Toyotas I enjoy, Hondas I enjoy also. They have relatively intelligent design. So I happen to be checking if it's an electronic rear brake caliper. If they happen to have an electronic parking brake, then the first step before you even jack up the car is actually to hook up the scanner and retract the rear caliper pistons and put them into what we call service mode. But this car doesn't have electronic calipers or an electronic parking brake. So that was the first thing I've wanted to check. Anytime you're doing rear brakes on a modern vehicle, you're going to want to check and make sure before you pop the wheels off, before you disassemble anything, does it have an electronic parking brake? So I've got my lift set here. We're going to jack it up, and generally after I jack him up, have the lift set, I'm going to go back around and I'm going to throw it in the park, turn the key off, because brake jobs are a long enough job, especially when you're waiting for a parts delivery, that the battery could potentially go dead. And nobody wants to deal with jump starting the car, charging the battery. And sorry to say, in my experience, in my career, I have absolutely had car batteries die under my watch while I'm working on them. And it's very easy for the customer to point a finger at you and say, this is your fault, I drove it in, it was fine. And I always say, hey, it's not my fault that your battery was on its last legs. If it can't handle being, having the key on for 10 minutes, then your battery is crap. So anyways, just to eliminate any of that potential issue that could arise from leaving the key on, I'm going to turn the key off. It's a good habit. And so anyways, first step here, take off the hubcaps, get access to the lug nuts, and I have a lingering suspicion it's a 21mm lug nut. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually grabbing all the tools that I need, and I've done so many brake jobs. I already know everything I'm going to need, so I throw all my tools on my cart. That's my little hub cleaner there, I love that. Got my brush, got my big old channel locks there to depress the piston. Unless it's a screw-in, those channel lock pliers will work just fine. So yeah, my 21, let's see how I did. Yep, 21. So let's crank these lug nuts off. I usually blow away that dust that comes off when you hit these lug nuts with the gun. Not particularly good to breathe that stuff. Slide it off, give her a little bouncy poo and then controller. And we're gonna set our tire aside. Now, what did I forget here? Aha, a screwdriver. Personally, the first thing that I actually like to do is pop out the little rubber plug here that gives access to the emergency brake adjustment on the rear. That's not required to do first, but that's something I generally like to do first. Get that out of the way. That way I don't throw the plug away with the rotors when I have them off. Then we're going to take these two 14mm caliper bolts loose. Now I absolutely love this ratchet here, this electronic cordless ratchet by Milwaukee. It's a 3/8 impact ratchet. I happen to use chrome sockets most of the time. I'm not worried about it. None of these bolts are very big, and I don't feel like I'm ever in any danger of damaging any of the sockets. So I'm going to pop the caliper off here. Generally I break them loose with a ratchet because I have broken one of those Milwaukee electronic ratchets before. So I break it loose with a manual ratchet, spin out the bolts with the electronic gun, depress the piston. Now you'll notice I'm leaving the caliper hanging. Well, this is an extremely light caliper. This caliper weighs almost nothing. This is probably one of the lightest calipers I've ever seen. I feel like I'm in no danger of damaging the brake hose, letting it hang. So there it sits. I pop off those brake pads with a little help from a screwdriver. We're going to pull out these sliders. Now, these sliders weren't stuck, so they popped right out. Wipe off the old grease, paint on some new grease. We're using synthetic brake caliper grease here. Bottom and top slider come out, wipe them clean, put on some grease, and pop them back in there. Very important step, you need to lube the slides. Oops, doesn't go there, goes back into the hole. Okay, cool. So next step, we're taking the hanger bolts off. These are 17s. And so we're going to crack these loose. They're actually fairly tight. And once these are cracked loose, we're going to go ahead and throw that 17 right onto the gun there. And I use this thing just to speed me up. You could unscrew these bolts by hand, you could do them with a ratchet, but quite frankly, this gun makes things so fast and easy. It's very ergonomic. I love that 3/8 kind of right angle gun there. That thing's awesome. I can't even tell you, ever since I first got that thing, boy does it speed me up. And I'm not working particularly hard and fast, but I kind of always have a good pace. I don't like to dilly-dally. I like to work. And so brake jobs are a joke to me. I've done so many. I know exactly what I'm doing. And out of all of the techs over all the years that we've had working at our shop, not to toot my own horn, but I am definitely the fastest brake job that I've ever seen. It's just a piece of cake to me these days, you know. So anyways, we're going to clean this hub here. Now this is an awesome hub cleaner, fits right over the studs, so you can clean it around the base of the studs, get any built up rust, corrosion, any kind of residue there. Then I generally like to hit in between the studs with it as well. This hub wasn't particularly dirty, but it's something that I've formed a habit of. I just like to do that. For one thing, I can say that I've done it in case anybody ever questions me. Let's say if they get rotor warpage and have a shake that develops, I can say, no, I have cleaned the hub. And I actually have a impact, let's see, like a air gun with a descaler attachment that if there's really heavy rust and scale built up on a hub surface, I can tackle that as well. Generally, that hub buster thing, that does pretty great. And so anyways, we're already onto the left side here. Crank these lug nuts off. We're going to follow the same sequence that we did on the right side. Off comes the tire. Get it out of our way. And then we're going to go ahead and crack loose these caliper bolts once again. These are 14s, lefty-loosey, ready-tighty. Break those free. Slap that socket right onto my little my electronic ratchet. Off with those bolts. Total piece of cake. We're going to slip that caliper off and depress the piston. And just a side note about that Milwaukee ratchet there. I've been using that for, I'm going to say, a little while. Less than 2 years, but more than a year. And I use that ratchet to screw in spark plugs. Now, I always start them by hand, but that Milwaukee ratchet there, I've never found it strong enough to be in any kind of real danger of stripping out a spark plug. So I always start spark plugs by hand with an extension and then screw them and bottom them out with that Milwaukee ratchet. And I find every time I've ever done spark plugs, I still end up needing to cinch them down and finish them off by hand. For some reason, I had my lug nuts on the cart still for the other side. So. But anyways, love that tool for screwing spark plugs in. It's just not strong enough to cause any problems, and it sure speeds me up. So these brake pads here were pretty stuck. I had to give them a little persuasion here with the screwdriver to get them off. I do believe that any minute the customer is going to interrupt me because he wants to see his rotors. A little annoyed, but here's your fucking old piece of junk rotor. It's just something I have to deal with at the moment. We're remodeling the office, and the customers literally stand right there and stare at me and ask me questions and talk to me, which in my experience is not particularly a great thing. I've actually made mistakes in the past because customers have been distracting me. It's a, it seems like a common sense thing, guys, but I want to put that out there. While your mechanic is focusing and hard at work on your vehicle, perhaps you should leave him alone and let him focus and do his job well. He can't give your car his full attention if you're trying to talk to him while he's working. Then what you and your car both get are what we call his divided attention. And trust me, you don't want that. You want your tech to focus on your car. Brakes aren't that hard. I could actually hold the whole conversation while doing brakes. It's no big deal. I literally am on autopilot. This is a total piece of cake for me at this point. But there was once a day where I just didn't have as much experience, didn't have hundreds of brake jobs under my belt, and it would have been a really bad idea to distract me while I was trying to focus and do the job. Anyways, we're going to slip our hanger bolts out here. I always break them free with the ratchet. I have literally snapped the head off of one of these Milwaukee ratchets before, trying to break bolts loose with it. I don't recommend it. It really is not that strong. So break them loose with a manual ratchet. That is highly recommended. Slip off our hardware shims here. Get these out of the way. I'm going to take our wire brush and try to scrub off any debris that might be growing underneath them. Oftentimes when you struggle to fit new brake pads into your hanger, it's because of built-up rust beneath the shims, the hardware shims. Now often the rotors are stuck, and so I had to give it a tap with a hammer to loosen it free. I can tell you guys from experience, sometimes rotors are horrifically stuck, and I have had a sledgehammer and every bit of me banging away at those things to get them loose. Also, if it has broken free and you still can't seem to get it off, there's a really good likelihood that the emergency brake shoes might need to be loosened using the adjustment star to relieve tension against the inner hat of the rotor. That'll often be a factor in getting those old rusty rotors off. The shoes that ride along the inner hat of the rotor, they wear down the inside of the hat and can form a lip. And when you go to slide those old rotors off, the lip will catch on the shoe material and can give you trouble trying to get the rotor off. So not a bad idea to loosen the emergency brake shoe, although I will say probably 9 out of 10 I don't actually have to, but the ones that do give me trouble, I have to loosen them. So, food for thought. Most of the time, the rotors just pop off with a little tap from the hammer. We're going to get our new shoes out of here. These premium or platinum aftermarket brake pads generally come with new hardware, and hardware is just another word for the little shims that the pads ride on. If the brake pads don't have the wear tabs already manufactured or riveted onto them, then they have these little loose wear tabs that you'll have to manually clip onto the pads. You'll see me do that. And so these shims here, they gave me a whole buttload of them. Now I only need 4 shims, 2 per hanger. And sometimes they'll give you multiple sets of shims because these pads might have multiple applications for different makes and models. These shims all actually seem to be the same, so I'm not sure why they put so many in that bag, but whatever. I'll take the 4 that I need. We're going to paint a little grease on the surface of the shim where the pad rides on this hardware shim. That's just part of doing a proper brake job. You want to lube the pads and you want to lube the hardware. You want to lube the sliders. Anything that kind of has moving parts, you're going to want to lubricate. And this is actually pretty important in the long run for ensuring that you do a good brake job and your pads are able to move freely. If you don't lubricate things well, the pads aren't going to move like they should, and this can cause rotor warpage. It can also cause squeaking. So make sure you lubricate things. It's important. Part of this brake job is cleaning and lubricating. Now these rotors, you'll notice me spraying them with brake cleaner. There's a film on the face of these rotors that's like a non-corrosive, non-rust coating so that they don't get rusted in the box. Well, if you're ASC certified, you'll know that I just use brake cleaner, and you're supposed to use warm soapy water. Well, I always use brake cleaner on a rag, and I've never had a problem. So that's what you just saw. Now, I pointed out that star adjuster. That's for the emergency brake. At this point, after you put the rotor on, you're going to want to adjust the emergency brake shoes. Now, what I always do is I adjust them until they max out and have full contact with the inner hat of the rotor. When you can't even move it, see that? It's sucked. And so what I'm going to do is back off a click or two until I'm able to spin it, and that's pretty much where you want it. When you spin it, you want it to stop on its own. You want it to have light tension. And this has been what I always end up doing is max out the shoe adjustment and then back off a little bit until you can actually spin the rotor again. Then we're going to have a nice properly adjusted e-brake after that. If you have it too tight, it's going to cook your rotor. And let me tell you, it's very embarrassing to come back into the shop with the brakes smoking. So don't want to embarrass yourself and look like a schmuck. Make sure you adjust that e-brake correctly. And I've gotten good at it over the years. I can do it pretty quickly now. And I'm quite confident in choosing the proper tension. Very rarely do I have to actually put the car back on the lift to readjust the e-brake. And Toyotas don't give me a whole lot of trouble either. They're a good design. Not a lot of baloney to have to deal with. Now I happen to be cleaning this other rotor just so I can get it off my cart. So I'm going to spray it, give it a wipe down, get that film off of the face of the rotor, and then go and pop it on the other hub so I can free up that space and get it out of my way. So slap that guy on there. We'll adjust that when we're done with the other side. And so we're going to come back over and finish off this side here. Now, time to cinch down those hanger bolts. Pretty much everything I ever do, I start by hand. It's just a bad idea to try and start bolts. Don't thread them with any kind of power tool. It's a stupid thing to do. You're going to mess up the threads at some point, and you're going to regret that you did that. So we start them by hand, thread them in with the gun, and then finish them off by hand. And this is how I do it. Everybody can do it their own way. Personally, this is what I like to do, and it works great for me. I don't mess up threads that way. I still use the gun, which speeds me up, and then I have them cinched down by hand, which gives me that good feel, so I know that I've made them nice and tight. And yeah, so we're going to clip on these wear indicators onto these brake pads. And the old pads had them on the bottom, so I'm going to mirror where they were before. Oftentimes I end up putting them on the top. I actually think that that's more common, but they were on the bottom before, and I'm just going to follow suit. I don't think it really matters top or bottom on this car, to be honest. So we're sliding in there, get it into our hanger in position. The other side as well. And notice we have to depress the shim a little to fit it in there. We're going to set our rotor, or our caliper back up, and then screw in these caliper bolts, true to form, starting them by hand. And we're going to cinch them down with the ratchet. And even these little 14mm bolts, I have never felt in any kind of danger of breaking them with this ratchet. Love that thing. Okay, we're going to finish them off by hand. These don't go nearly as tight as the hanger bolts. They're much smaller. You just need to cinch them down a bit. Make sure that they're not going to come loose. Done deal. We're all done. We're going to slap our tire back up on there. And once you put the wheel up, start them lug nuts by hand. Another very important thing in my opinion. It's a pretty minor aspect of this, but I'm telling you guys, don't try to start lug nuts with a gun. It's a stupid thing to do. Start them by hand. That way you can feel that the threads are properly screwed in together. And then we have our 80-foot bound torque bar here. This is so we don't over tighten the lug nuts. Now, if you happen to have had issues in the past where you get your brakes done and then you develop a rotor shake shortly after, well, I want you guys to know that over torquing your lug nuts can actually cause that symptom. So as a tech, I take it seriously, and I think it's important that you do it properly, and I always have that torque limiting bar on my gun so that I don't over torque them. Places that are notorious for that are like Jiffy Lube, Costco. If you ever see a tech just take a socket on a gun and hammer your lug nuts down, well, you can bet that he over torqued your lug nuts. That's a no-no. It can cause rotor warpage and a brake shake. So we're on to the other side now. We're going to adjust this guy just like the other side all the way until it maxes out. Now I do believe that I'm going to drop it a couple of clicks, and that was it. That one went really well. And then I decided actually it was a little too easy. So I'm going to go back, being very touchy here, half a click. I just need to have a little bit of tension on that rotor. You don't want it to be too free. There you go. I can feel the tension there, but I can still spin it by hand. So happy with that. That feels good. We're going to pop this cap back in. The cap is also important. It stops dirt and water from the road from getting inside of your rotor onto your e-brake, shoes, and springs, and it can cause corrosion and issues in the long run. So the little rubber cap, it's fairly important in my opinion. You're going to want to have that. So now we're putting the hardware on this hanger here and lubing them up. I'm going to slap this guy on, and we're going to start our bolts. Now this one, of course, just like the other side, the hardware is loosey-goosey, and unfortunately it actually got some grease on the face of this rotor, which you really don't want. So I'm going to be sure to spray that grease that got on that rotor off before I put the pads on. I don't want to cook the grease into this pad material. That's just bad etiquette. So cinch down our bolts on our hanger once again. And finish them off by hand. Yeah, give them a nice good torque in there. Oh yeah. Pop that hardware back up in there. And I'm going to use the screwdriver because it really doesn't want to stay, to try and press these little ears in the center of the hanger to help persuade the hardware to stick, so I can slide my pads in there. I'm going to go ahead and put the wear indicator on these guys, hit them with a little bit of synthetic brake caliper grease, and we're gonna pop them on in the hanger with the clip on the bottom, just like the other side. Relatively simple, easy. I will say I've done much more tedious brake jobs on cars. Brakes in general are not that difficult. But you'd be surprised, once you work on enough makes and models, some of them are a real pain in the booty. Especially when they get really nasty, rusted, you can have major complications. So this one, the wear tab, didn't want to stay on top of the hardware, so I had to reposition that. And yeah, sometimes you never know. See, I'm spinning the rotor down to see that grease. I'm going to get that off of there. We don't want that on our pad material. So yeah, I've had brake jobs that seem like they're going to be simple turn into nightmares. You can run into all kinds of stuff. Stuck caliper pistons. You can have hangers that have rusted like crazy and you can't fit the new pads in, that you just have to file away at until you can make room for the new pads. I've had rotors break, the ring around the rotor break off the hat because they're so rusted to the hub, and you can have all kinds of dumb crap happen on brakes. Luckily, this one went really smooth. No complications, nothing funky, no issues really whatsoever. This all just went very smooth and easy, which is how a majority of them go. I always feel bad for people that live on the rust belt that have to deal with all kinds of stupid rust problems all the time. Yikes, I feel for you guys. Even here in Virginia, I still run across some pretty nasty rust issues on vehicles, but I have all the tools necessary to handle that stuff. So that was it. We've got our brakes assembled. We're going to go ahead and pop this wheel on here, start our lug nuts, then we're going to cinch them down. And I do think I had a little issue trying to get this plastic hubcap back on, so you'll see that in just a moment. Always tighten these lug nuts in a star pattern, by the way. It helps to ensure that the rim will sit down flat against the hub. Some techs like to go around and kiss all the lug nuts a second time. I don't usually bother. I have enough experience. I can feel that it sat flat when I first tightened it. So here I am. See, I'm trying to pop this hubcap on, but the little fingers that slide into the rim sure didn't want to push into position on this one, so I ended up getting my screwdriver to help persuade these little plastic fingers into their positions, and then I was able to smack that hubcap right into place. So we're all good to go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And that was it. We're going to drop her down at this point, and you'll notice once I have it on the ground, the first thing that I always check immediately before I even get out of the shop is my emergency brake adjustment. If the e-brake is too loose, or let's say I somehow made it too tight, I need to put it right back up on the lift and readjust the emergency brake. Although that's pretty rare for me. Generally I get it right the first time nowadays. So we drop her down, we kick these lift arms out of the way, get our nasty gloves off. If I need to, sometimes I gotta wash up. I gotta keep these customer cars clean. And we're gonna start her up, check the e-brake, and go on a little test drive just to make sure everything feels good and to kind of break these new pads and rotors in. There is generally a break-in procedure for every vehicle. I don't always follow it. The truth is, a lot of customers are going to be driving plenty on their own, in which case they'll break these things in naturally and mate the pads to the rotors. See, right here, I'm in reverse, and I'm checking the e-brake a couple of times just to make sure it's strong enough to hold, lock the wheels. And We're going to back on out. It felt nice and tight. If you guys don't know, on e-brake pedals or levers, you're going to want about a 6-click max adjustment or less. And at least here for our state inspections, if you have more than 6 clicks, you will fail. So they have to be fairly tight. Things have to actually work here in Virginia. They're pretty stiff about that stuff. They have a big list of all kinds of things they check, and the e-brake's one of them. And you gotta get that done once a year. Make sure it works right. So we're gonna go on a little test drive here. That's pretty much it. I don't hear any squeaks, don't feel any shakes, no noise, no problem. We're gonna give it a thumbs up and say that we're all done. That was quick, easy, and yeah, overall went very smooth. So this is actually a little more involved than the front brakes, because on the front brakes you don't have to deal with the emergency brake whatsoever. That's only on the rear wheels. Front brakes, you just simply replace the pads and rotors and go on with your day. Well, that was it for now. I hope you guys enjoyed that walkthrough, and I hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks for visiting with me. Hope maybe you learned a trick or two. Take care now, guys.